The morning Penelope Fairchild stepped off the stagecoach in Glenrio, New Mexico, she discovered that the man who had promised to marry her did not exist. The station clerk scratched his graying beard and looked at her with something between pity and suspicion as she showed him the letters, the careful script describing a prosperous ranch and a lonely widower seeking companionship. He shook his head slowly, told her no man by that name had ever lived in this dusty corner of the territory, and went back to sorting mail as though her entire world had not just collapsed. Penelope stood outside the weathered building clutching her carpet bag, the November wind of 1884 cutting through her traveling dress like it was made of tissue paper. She had 23 cents in her purse, no family to return to in Philadelphia, and the stage had already departed back east. The sun climbed higher, but offered no warmth, and she realized with growing horror that she had nowhere to go. The streets of Glenrio were nearly empty at this early hour. Just a few buildings clustered along the railroad tracks that had brought limited prosperity to this isolated place where New Mexico met Texas. She walked to the small hotel, hoping perhaps they would show mercy, but the proprietor took one look at her situation and shook his head before she even finished speaking. The saloon was not an option she would consider, though she noticed the painted women watching from the upper windows with expressions that might have been sympathy. By afternoon, Penelope had knocked on every door that seemed respectable, asked at the general store, the blacksmith, even the small church, but no one needed help or was willing to extend credit to a stranger. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, panic set in properly. She had eaten nothing since yesterday, and the temperature was dropping rapidly. The station clerk had mentioned that November nights in this high desert country could dip well below freezing, and her traveling cloak was meant for Pennsylvania winters, not the harsh exposed plains of New Mexico territory. She returned to the station, hoping to at least shelter there, but found it locked tight, the clerk gone home to wherever he lived. Penelope tried the church next, but the door was barred from the inside. She sat on the steps for a while, praying for guidance, for help, for anything, but only the wind answered. As darkness fell completely, she made her way to the side of the general store where there was a small overhang, thinking it might provide some protection. She wrapped her cloak tightly around herself and sat on her carpet bag, tucking her hands into her armpits and drawing her knees up under her skirts. The cold intensified as the night deepened. Penelope had never experienced anything like it. The wind seemed to search out every gap in her clothing, and the wooden wall behind her leached what little warmth her body tried to maintain. She tried to sleep, but could only manage brief periods of semi-consciousness before the shivering woke her again. Her fingers and toes went numb first, then her ears and nose. She worried about frostbite, about freezing to death in this God-forsaken place, and wondered bleakly if anyone would even notice until morning. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. She recited prayers, thought about her mother who had died 3 years ago, about the factory work she had escaped by answering that lying bastard's advertisement. She had been so hopeful, so ready to start fresh in the West. Now she would likely die here, and no one would mourn her. The irony was bitter as the wind. When the sky finally began to lighten, turning from black to deep blue, Penelope realized she could no longer feel her feet. She tried to stand, thinking movement might help, but her legs would not cooperate properly. She managed to get upright but swayed dangerously, her vision swimming. The main street was still empty, the town not yet stirring. She stumbled forward a few steps, desperate to find warmth, to find help, but her coordination was gone. She fell to her knees in the dirt, then forward onto her hands, gasping. That was when she heard the horse. Hoofbeats approaching slowly, then stopping. She could not lift her head to look, all her energy focused on simply breathing, on surviving another moment. Boots appeared in her limited field of vision, worn leather spattered with mud and dust. Jesus Christ. The voice was male, rough with shock and something else, something that might have been anger or fear. How long have you been out here? Penelope tried to answer, but her jaw would not work properly. A strong arm went around her shoulders, another under her knees, and suddenly she was being lifted. The movement sent sharp pains through her frozen limbs, and she whimpered despite herself. "I've got you. Stay with me now." The man carried her swiftly, his long strides covering ground quickly. She caught glimpses of his face, rough-hewn features beneath a wide-brimmed hat, dark eyes that kept flicking down to her with concern. He kicked open a door, and warmth hit her like a physical force. Owen. What in the name of another voice, older female, found her on the street, near frozen. "Get blankets and warm water, not hot, just warm, and coffee if you have got it ready." The man, Owen apparently, set Penelope down in a chair near a stove. The heat was almost painful against her frozen skin. An older woman with gray hair pinned in a neat bun appeared, her face creased with worry. Poor child. "Owen, help me get this cloak off her. It is damp with frost." Together they worked to remove her outer layers. Penelope wanted to protest, wanted to maintain some shred of dignity, but she could barely move. The woman wrapped her in thick wool blankets while Owen crouched in front of her, taking her hands in his and rubbing them gently. "Can you hear me? Can you speak?" His voice was gentler now, coaxing. "Why, yes." It came out as barely a whisper, but it was something. His face relaxed slightly. "Good. That is good. What is your name?" Penelope F. Fairchild. "I am Owen Watts. This is Martha. She runs the boarding house. You are safe now." He kept rubbing her hands, warming them slowly. Martha appeared with a cup of something that steamed, and between them they helped Penelope drink. It was broth, salty and rich, and it burned going down, but in a good way. "What were you doing out there?" Martha asked, her tone not unkind but clearly baffled. The whole miserable story spilled out, disjointed and interrupted by shivering, but they listened patiently. When she finished, Martha made a disgusted sound. "That would be the third time someone has used that scheme. Men are fools, and whoever is writing those letters is a criminal." "You are the first who has actually arrived, though. The others figured it out before they got on the stage." "I should have been more careful," Penelope said, tears finally coming. She had been too shocked and cold to cry before, but now in the warmth and safety, everything crashed over her. "I had nowhere else to go. The factory was closing and my landlady was threatening to turn me out anyway." Owen sat back on his heels, his expression thoughtful. "You have no money, nowhere to stay. 23 cents. I tried everywhere yesterday, but no one needs help or will take me in." "You will stay here," Martha said firmly. "I always have room for one more. We can work out payment later. Right now you need food and rest and to thaw out properly." "I cannot take charity. It is not charity if you work for it. I could use help with the washing and cooking." "Lord knows my joints are not what they used to be." Martha patted her shoulder. "First things first, though. Let us get you truly warm and check for frostbite." Over the next hour, they tended to Penelope with practiced efficiency. Martha examined her fingers and toes, pronouncing them cold but not frozen beyond recovery. Owen left and returned with her carpet bag from where she had abandoned it, setting it beside the chair without comment. Martha made her eat more broth, then eggs and bread, and finally showed her to a small room on the second floor with a real bed and clean linens. "Rest now. We can discuss everything else later." Martha pulled the curtains closed, dimming the now bright morning light, and left Penelope alone. She collapsed onto the bed and slept deeply, dreamlessly, for the first time in days. When Penelope woke, the light coming through the curtains suggested late afternoon. Her body ached in strange places and her hands and feet tingled uncomfortably, but she was warm and alive. She sat up slowly, taking stock. Someone had brought her carpet bag up and set it on the chest at the foot of the bed. There was a wash basin with water that was cold now but still clean, and she took the opportunity to wash her face and hands before changing into a fresh dress, a simple blue calico she had made herself. Downstairs, she found Martha in the kitchen, up to her elbows in bread dough. The older woman looked up and smiled. "There you are, feeling better." "Yes, thank you. I cannot express how grateful I am. Owen is the one who found you. He rides out early to check his herd, comes through town at dawn most days, if he had been even an hour later." She did not finish the thought. "But he was not, so let us be thankful for that. I would like to thank him properly. He will be around for supper, eats here most nights, finds my cooking better than his own." Martha smiled. "In the meantime, if you are feeling up to it, you could help me with these dishes." Penelope threw herself into the work, grateful for something to do, a way to be useful. Martha ran a tidy establishment, taking in both long-term boarders and travelers passing through. There were 6 rooms for rent, currently 4 occupied. Besides Owen, there was a railroad surveyor, a traveling salesman, and a schoolteacher. All men, which made Penelope slightly nervous, but Martha assured her they were decent sorts and she would tolerate no trouble under her roof. Owen arrived as the sun was setting, stomping dust from his boots before entering. He removed his hat, and Penelope got her first good look at him in proper light. He was probably in his late 20s, tall and lean with the kind of build that came from hard physical work. His hair was dark brown, a bit too long, and his face was tanned from constant sun exposure. But it was his eyes that caught her, dark and serious but not unkind. "Miss Fairchild, good to see you up and about." He nodded to her politely. "Mr. Watts, I wanted to thank you. You saved my life this morning. Just happened to be riding past at the right time. Anyone would have done the same. But no one else did," she said quietly. "I was there all night and no one came." He looked uncomfortable with the gratitude, shifting his weight. "Well, I am glad you are all right. That is what matters." Over supper, Penelope learned more about Glenrio and its inhabitants. The town had sprung up along the railroad line, hoping to become a major shipping point for cattle. It had not quite worked out that way, as larger towns to the east and west had better water supplies and facilities. Still, it persisted, serving the scattered ranches and homesteads in the area. Owen ran cattle on land his father had claimed after the war, a few thousand acres of scrubland that barely supported his herd but was his own. The surveyor talked about the railroad's plans to expand, the salesman complained about the state of the roads, and the schoolteacher, a young man named Mr. Finch, expressed concern about the lack of books for his students. It was all so normal, so mundane, and yet it felt magical to Penelope after the horror of the previous night. To sit at a table with food and warmth and conversation, to be safe, felt like an unimaginable luxury. After supper, Owen lingered while the others went to their rooms or out to the saloon. He helped clear the table without being asked, stacking plates with the ease of long practice. "How are you really?" he asked Penelope when Martha stepped into the pantry. "Not just physically, I mean." The question caught her off guard. "I do not know," she admitted. "Relieved, grateful, angry at my own foolishness." "You were not foolish, you were deceived. There is a difference. I should have suspected. The letters were too perfect, too good to be true. Hope is not a character flaw." He set the stack of plates down and looked at her directly. "What will you do now?" Work here, I suppose, until I can save enough for a stage ticket. Return east, find another factory job. The prospect felt bleak. You did not like factory work. I hated it. The noise, the long hours, the way the foreman looked at us like we were machines that sometimes broke. But it paid and I could support myself. Owen nodded slowly. For what it is worth, I am sorry your fresh start turned out this way. Everyone deserves a chance at something better. There was something in his tone, a sincerity that made Penelope's throat tight. Thank you, she managed. He reached out and briefly squeezed her shoulder, the gesture almost brotherly. You will get through this. You are tougher than you think. Anyone who survived last night has to be. Over the following days, Penelope settled into a rhythm at the boarding house. She rose early to help Martha prepare breakfast, cleaned the rooms, did washing and mending, and assisted with supper preparations. The work was hard but satisfying in a way the factory had never been. She could see the results of her labor, take pride in clean linens and a well-set table. Owen continued to come for breakfast and supper, and Penelope found herself looking forward to his arrivals. He was a quiet man, not given to excessive speech, but when he did talk it was worth hearing. He told her about the challenges of ranching in this harsh climate, about the constant battle against weather and predators and simple bad luck. He had lost his parents to influenza 3 years back. His only sibling, a sister, had married and moved to Colorado. The ranch was all he had, all he wanted. You never get lonely? Penelope asked one evening as they sat on the boarding house porch. The days were still relatively warm, though the nights remained bitter. Owen considered the question. Sometimes, but I have got the work and that keeps me busy. I come to town often enough to remember why I like the solitude. He smiled slightly. Present company accepted, of course. Of course. Penelope smiled back. She was darning socks, making use of the last light. I think I understand, though. There is something to be said for quiet. You do not find it here. Some. More than in Philadelphia, certainly. There the noise never stopped, even at night. Here, once everyone has gone to bed, it is truly silent. I like that. They fell into a comfortable quiet, the kind that felt natural rather than awkward. Penelope found herself stealing glances at him, noticing small things. The way his hands were never quite still, always turning his hat brim or fidgeting with a loose thread. The small scar above his left eyebrow. The way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not paying attention, like he was trying to figure out a puzzle. A week after her arrival, the town held a small dance at the church hall to celebrate a local couple's 50th wedding anniversary. Martha insisted Penelope attend, claiming she had been working too hard and needed an evening out. Penelope protested that she had no proper dress for dancing, but Martha produced a gown that had belonged to her daughter, long since married and moved away, and altered it to fit. The hall was crowded and warm, lit by dozens of candles and a pair of oil lamps. A fiddle player and a man with a guitar provided music, and the dancing was energetic if not particularly polished. Penelope stood to the side, watching, until Mr. Finch asked her to dance. He was a competent partner, if overly talkative, and she managed to follow his lead through a reel without embarrassing herself. When that dance ended, she returned to her place by the wall, fanning herself with her hand. The surveyor asked for the next dance, then the salesman. She was beginning to feel breathless and overheated when Owen appeared at her elbow. You look like you could use some air, he observed, that obvious, only to someone paying attention. He offered his arm. Walk outside with me. They stepped out into the cold night, and Penelope breathed deeply, grateful for the chill against her flushed skin. The music was muffled but still audible, and above them the stars were impossibly bright, uncountable. I have never seen so many stars, she said softly. In the city, you can only see the brightest ones. Out at the ranch, it is even better. No light at all to interfere, just you and the sky. Owen looked up, his profile sharp in the starlight. Sometimes when I cannot sleep, I go outside and just look. Helps put things in perspective. How so? Reminds me how small I am, how small all of this is. Makes my problem seem less insurmountable. Penelope thought about that. I suppose it could also make you feel insignificant. It could, but I choose to find it comforting instead. There is something freeing in knowing the universe does not actually revolve around you and your troubles. They walked slowly along the street, staying within sight of the hall but enjoying the relative privacy. Penelope was acutely aware of his proximity, the solid warmth of him beside her. "May I ask you something?" Owen said after a while. "Of course. Are you still planning to return east?" Penelope had been trying not to think about that. "I do not know. I should, I suppose. There is nothing for me here. You have Martha, and your work at the boarding house. Washing dishes and making beds, that is not a future. Why not? It is honest work. I know I did not mean to disparage it, but it is not mine, not really. I am only there because of Martha's kindness." Owen stopped walking and turned to face her. "What would you want if you could have anything?" The question was so unexpected, so sincere that Penelope answered honestly. "A home. Not just a place to sleep, but a real home. A family, maybe, someday. A reason to stay in one place and put down roots. I have been drifting since my mother died, and I am tired of it." Something shifted in Owen's expression, though in the darkness she could not quite read it. "That does not seem like too much to ask for. Perhaps not, but it has proven difficult to obtain." He started to say something, stopped, then seemed to gather himself. "Penelope, there you are." Martha's voice cut through the night. She hurried toward them, slightly out of breath. "Owen, they are calling for a couple's dance and half the men have already found partners. You should ask Penelope before she is claimed by someone else." Owen and Penelope looked at each other, and she saw a flash of humor in his eyes despite whatever he had been about to say. "Would you do me the honor?" he asked formally, offering his hand. "I would be delighted." Inside, the fiddle player was starting a waltz, slower and more romantic than the previous dances. Owen took Penelope's hand and placed his other at her waist, and they began to move. He was a better dancer than she had expected, leading with quiet confidence. She focused on following, on not stepping on his feet, but gradually relaxed into the rhythm. "You dance well," she said. "My mother insisted. Said a man needed to know how to conduct himself in polite society, even if he spent most of his time with cattle." There was fondness in his voice when he spoke of her. "She sounds like she was a wise woman." She was. Stubborn as hell, begging your pardon, but wise. She would have liked you. The comment made Penelope's heart skip. "Why do you say that?" She admired strength. "Not the loud kind, but the quiet kind. The kind that keeps you going when everything has gone wrong." He met her eyes. "The kind that lets you survive a night that should have killed you." Penelope did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing, just let herself be led around the floor. Other couples swirled around them, but she barely noticed. She was too aware of Owen's hand warm on her waist, of how close they were, of the way he was looking at her. When the music ended, they stood still for a moment before stepping apart. The hall felt too warm again, too crowded. Owen seemed to feel it too because he said, "Another walk." They slipped out again, this time heading toward the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open land. The music faded behind them until it was just a distant thread of sound. The night was huge and silent around them, and Penelope felt like they were the only two people in the world. "What were you going to say earlier?" she asked, before Martha interrupted. Owen was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious. I was going to say that I understand about wanting a home, wanting to stop drifting. I have the land, the house, but it is empty. Has been since my parents died. I work from dawn until dark, then I sit alone in that house and eat cold suppers and try not to think about how quiet it is. Owen, let me finish, please. He took a breath. When I found you that morning, something in me just shifted. The thought of you dying there, alone and cold when I was less than a mile away. It made me angry. Not at you, but at the world, at myself for not coming sooner. And then when you opened your eyes and looked at me, I thought. He shook his head. I know this is too fast. I know you barely know me. But I cannot stop thinking about you. And I want you to know that if you decide to stay, if you want to build a life here, you would not be doing it alone. I would help, however you needed. Penelope's heart was pounding. What are you saying exactly? I am saying that I would like to court you properly. With your permission. I am saying that I want the chance to see if this, whatever this is between us, could be something real. And I am saying that even if you do not feel the same way, you do not have to leave. This town, this territory, it could be your home if you wanted it to be. She stared at him, overwhelmed. It had been less than 2 weeks since she arrived, since her world fell apart. This should feel too fast, too sudden. But standing here under the stars with this good man offering her not just help but a future, it felt right in a way nothing had in years. I do not know what to say. Say you will think about it. Say you will give us a chance. Yes. The word came out before she fully thought it through, but once said, she did not want to take it back. Yes, I will think about it. And yes, you may court me. The smile that broke across Owen's face was like sunrise, warm and brilliant. He reached out and took her hand, holding it gently. You will not regret this, I promise. I believe you. They walked back to the boarding house hand in hand, and Penelope felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Hope. The courtship that followed was unlike anything Penelope had experienced. Owen was not a man of flowery words or grand gestures, but he showed his feelings through actions. He appeared every morning for breakfast and stayed to help with dishes. He brought her small gifts, a book of poetry from the traveling salesman's stock, a pair of warm gloves when he noticed her chapped hands, a piece of turquoise he said reminded him of her eyes. He took her riding on the days when her work was light, borrowing a gentle mare from the livery and leading her out to see the land. The New Mexico territory was harsh but beautiful, all big sky and distant mesas, and Owen knew every inch of it. He showed her where wild roses grew in the spring, where the antelope gathered to graze, where his property began and ended. The ranch house was small but solidly built, stone and timber with a wide porch facing east to catch the morning sun. Inside it was neat but sparse, a bachelor's home without a woman's touch. Penelope could see the potential, though, the way it could be with curtains on the windows and rugs on the floor and care put into the details. I know it is not much, Owen said, watching her take it in. It is a good house. Strong, just needs some life breathed back into it. Would you want to do that? Breathe life into it, I mean. She turned to look at him. Are you asking what I think you are asking? He moved closer, taking both her hands in his. I know we have not been courting long. I know by all rights I should wait longer, do this properly. But I am not a patient man when I know what I want, and I want you, Penelope. I want to wake up to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to build a life together, a real life. So yes, I am asking. Will you marry me? Penelope's eyes filled with tears, but they were good tears. We have known each other less than 6 weeks. I know, people will talk. Let them. I came here as a mail-order bride expecting to marry a stranger. This is not so different. It is completely different. You know me. You have seen the worst of what I have to offer, which is mainly stubbornness and bad coffee. And I know you, your strength and kindness and the way you hum when you work without realizing it. This is not a transaction, Penelope. This is real." She knew he was right. What she felt for Owen had grown quickly, but it was genuine, rooted in respect and affection and a deep sense of rightness. She loved his steadiness, his quiet humor, the way he listened when she spoke. She loved how he treated her like an equal, someone whose opinions mattered. She loved the life she could see stretching ahead with him, full of work and challenge but also joy. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Owen let out a breath she had not realized he was holding and pulled her into an embrace. She wrapped her arms around him, feeling the solid warmth of him. And for the first time since her mother died, Penelope felt like she was home. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church, with Martha standing up for Penelope and the surveyor serving as Owen's best man. The preacher's wife had produced a simple white dress that fit well enough with a few alterations, and Penelope carried a small bouquet of dried flowers that Martha had saved from her garden. It was nothing like the grand wedding Penelope had imagined as a girl, but it was perfect. Owen said his vows in a steady voice, his eyes never leaving hers. When it came time to kiss his bride, he did so gently, reverently, and Penelope felt her heart swell with a love so fierce it almost frightened her. The boarding house residents and half the town attended the small reception Martha insisted on hosting. There was cake and coffee and well wishes, and Penelope smiled until her face hurt. But the best moment came when the crowd finally dispersed, and Owen helped her into the wagon for the ride to the ranch, to her new home. "Happy?" he asked as they rattled along the rutted road. "Incredibly. Good, because I plan to keep you that way." He reached over and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. The house was dark when they arrived, but Owen had laid a fire ready in the hearth and it caught quickly when he lit it. The room filled with warm, flickering light, and Penelope looked around at what was now hers as much as his. "I know it needs work," Owen said, suddenly nervous. "I have been alone so long I stopped seeing what was missing." Penelope turned to him and placed her hands on his chest, feeling his heart beating strong and fast. "It is not missing anything important. It has you, and now it has me. That is all it needs." He kissed her then, deeper than before, and she responded with all the love and passion she had been holding back. His arms came around her, holding her close, and she felt safe in a way she never had before. Safe and wanted and cherished. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, Owen proving to be a gentle and considerate lover despite his rough exterior. Afterward, lying in his arms in the darkness, Penelope thought about the girl who had stepped off that stagecoach just weeks ago, lost and alone and freezing. She felt like a different person now, remade by circumstance and Owen's steadfast love. "What are you thinking?" Owen murmured, his breath warm against her hair. "That I nearly died that morning, that if you had not found me none of this would have happened. Do not think about that." "But it is true, and in a strange way I am grateful for it, not for almost dying but for what came after, for you finding me, for everything that has led to this moment." Owen tightened his arms around her. "You will never see Dawn alone again, I promise you that. Every morning for the rest of our lives, I will be here beside you." The words echoed in her heart, a vow more binding than the ones they had spoken in church. Penelope turned in his embrace and kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it. When they finally broke apart, she whispered, "And you will never be alone either. I am here, Owen, for all of it, the good and the bad and everything between. That is all I need." They fell asleep tangled together, and when dawn came creeping through the window, Penelope woke to find Owen already awake, watching her with such love in his eyes that it took her breath away. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch infinitely gentle. "Good morning, wife." "Good morning, husband." He leaned down and kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips. "I will never get tired of saying that. Good, because I will never get tired of hearing it." The first months of marriage were an adjustment. Penelope had never run a household before, and ranch life was different from anything she had experienced. She learned to cook on the wood stove, to preserve meat and vegetables for winter, to mend not just clothes but harnesses and tack. She learned to read the weather, to recognize the signs of a coming storm. She learned the rhythms of the cattle, when they needed to be moved to different pastures, when calving season would begin. Owen was patient with her mistakes and generous with his praise. He taught her to ride properly, not just the sedate walks she had managed before, but real riding, cantering across the open range with the wind in her face. He taught her to shoot, insisting that she needed to be able to protect herself when he was out checking distant fence lines. She proved to be a decent shot, better than he had expected, and his pride in her made her glow. They worked side by side, building a life from the ground up. Penelope planted a kitchen garden as soon as the weather warmed, coaxing vegetables from the stubborn soil. She made curtains for the windows and rag rugs for the floors. She took over the ranch accounts, her neat handwriting and head for figures bringing order to Owen's haphazard records. Slowly, the house transformed from a place Owen slept to a true home, warm and welcoming. Martha visited often, always arriving with some small gift or treat and staying for dinner. She and Penelope had formed a deep friendship, and Owen was grateful for it. He knew Penelope missed female companionship, and Martha provided that along with wisdom and humor. "You two are good together," Martha said one afternoon as she and Penelope worked on preserving peaches. "I knew it the moment I saw him carrying you in. He had this look on his face like he was carrying something infinitely precious." Penelope felt her cheeks warm. "I think I fell in love with him almost immediately. I was just too cold and scared to realize it at first. Love often comes when we least expect it. You came here for one man and found a better one." "I did, though I wish it had not taken such a terrible night to bring us together. Sometimes the hard things lead us to where we are meant to be. You would not appreciate what you have now if you had not lost everything first." There was truth in that, Penelope knew. She valued every moment with Owen, every ordinary day, because she knew how easily it could have been otherwise. As summer turned to fall, Penelope began to suspect she might be pregnant. She said nothing at first, not wanting to raise hopes if she was wrong, but when she missed her monthly courses for the third time, she made a trip to town to see the doctor. He confirmed what she already knew, and she rode home in a daze of joy and terror. Owen was out with the herd when she arrived, so she went about her usual tasks, too nervous and excited to sit still. She planned and discarded a dozen ways to tell him, wanting it to be special. In the end, when he came in for dinner, dusty and tired, she just blurted it out. "I am going to have a baby." Owen stopped in the middle of washing his hands, water dripping forgotten from his fingers. "What? A baby?" "The doctor confirmed it today. I am almost 3 months along, I think." For a moment he just stared at her, and then he was across the room, picking her up and spinning her around despite her squealed protests. He set her down gently, his hands on her shoulders, his face split by the biggest grin she had ever seen. "A baby. We are going to have a baby. We are." He kissed her soundly, then dropped to his knees and pressed his ear to her belly as though he could hear the baby already. "Hello in there. I am your father, and I already love you more than I thought possible." Penelope laughed and cried at the same time, running her fingers through his hair. This man, this good, wonderful man who had saved her life and given her a future beyond her wildest dreams. The pregnancy progressed smoothly despite Penelope's fears. She continued to work around the ranch. though Owen tried to insist she rest more. They compromised, with her taking on lighter tasks and leaving the heavy work to him. He was endlessly solicitous, worrying over every twinge and discomfort, until she finally told him he was being ridiculous. "You cannot wrap me in cotton wool for 9 months, Owen. I am pregnant, not made of glass. I know. I just want you and the baby safe. We are safe. We have you." Winter arrived, and Penelope found herself thinking about that terrible night a year ago when she had nearly frozen to death. It felt like a lifetime had passed since then. She was a different person now, stronger and more confident, secure in her place in the world. When the first real snow fell, she stood on the porch watching it blanket the land, Owen's arms around her from behind, his hands resting on her swollen belly. "You ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Staying here, marrying me so quickly?" "Never, not once. Do you?" "God, no. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." He kissed her temple. "I think about that morning sometimes, how close I came to losing you before I even really had you. If I had taken a different route, if I had left 10 minutes later. But you did not. You found me exactly when you were supposed to. I like to think it was fate, that you were meant to be here with me." Penelope turned in his arms as much as her belly allowed and cupped his face in her hands. "I do not know about fate, but I know that I love you, and I am grateful every single day that you said what you said, that you promised I would never see Dawn alone again. And I have kept that promise." "You have, and I have kept mine to be here through everything, good and bad." They kissed, slow and sweet, the snow falling silently around them. It was a perfect moment, one of many they had shared and would share in the years to come. Penelope went into labor on a bright March morning, the land just starting to show signs of spring. Owen rode to town at a gallop to fetch the doctor and Martha, while Penelope tried to remain calm and breathe through the contractions. They returned within 2 hours, Martha immediately taking charge and the doctor setting up his equipment with practiced efficiency. The labor was long and hard, lasting well into the night. Owen stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, letting her squeeze until his bones creaked, murmuring encouragement. When the baby finally arrived in the dark hours before dawn, his lusty cry filling the room, Owen had tears streaming down his face. "A boy," the doctor announced. "Healthy and strong." Martha cleaned the baby and wrapped him in blankets before placing him in Penelope's arms. She looked down at his tiny red face, his eyes squinted shut against the light, and felt a love so overwhelming it was almost painful. Owen leaned over her shoulder, one arm around her, one finger gently touching their son's hand. The baby's tiny fingers wrapped around Owen's larger one, and they both made sounds that might have been laughter or sobs or both. "He is perfect," Owen whispered. "He is. What should we call him?" They had discussed names but never settled on anything definite. Now, holding their son, Owen said, "What about Charles, after my father? Charles Watts, I like it. Charlie for short. Charlie." Owen tried it out, smiling. "Welcome to the world, Charlie." The baby squirmed and made a small noise, and Penelope felt her heart expand to accommodate this new love. She looked up at Owen, saw the same overwhelming emotion on his face, and knew they were thinking the same thing. They had made this perfect tiny person from their love. It was a miracle. The doctor and Martha stayed for a few more hours, making sure Penelope and the baby were both doing well, then took their leave with promises to check in soon. Owen helped Penelope into a clean nightgown and fresh bedding, then settled beside her, the baby cradled between them. "You were amazing," he said softly. "So strong. I had you with me. That made all the difference." They lay there in the growing light of dawn, watching their son sleep, marveling over every tiny detail. His miniature fingernails, the way his mouth moved in his sleep, the dark fuzz of hair on his head. It was the dawn of a new day and a new chapter in their lives, and Penelope had never been happier. The months that followed were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Charlie was a good baby, healthy and generally content, but still demanded constant attention. Penelope marveled at how something so small could take up so much time and energy. Owen was a doting father, taking shifts walking the baby at night, changing diapers without complaint, and spending any free moment he had playing with his son. As Charlie grew, his personality emerged. He was curious and determined, fighting his swaddling and later trying to roll over weeks before he was ready. He had his father's dark eyes and his mother's stubbornness, a combination that promised interesting years ahead. Owen would hold him up and talk to him about the ranch, about the cattle and horses, and Penelope would laugh at the serious expression on the baby's face, as though he understood every word. Martha visited often, always ready to hold the baby and give Penelope a break. The older woman had become like a grandmother to Charlie, and Penelope knew how much that meant to Owen, who wanted his son to have family even if it was not blood. When Charlie was 6 months old, Penelope discovered she was pregnant again. Owen's reaction was identical to the first time, joy mixed with concern for her health and stamina. This pregnancy was harder, chasing after a mobile baby while growing another, but Penelope managed with Owen's help and Martha's frequent assistance. Their second child, a daughter they named Grace, arrived 2 weeks early on a summer evening. Her birth was faster than Charlie's, and she came into the world with less fuss, opening her eyes almost immediately and looking around with what seemed like interest. She had wisps of light brown hair and eyes that would eventually turn hazel, and Owen fell in love instantly. 2 children, he said wonderingly, holding Grace while Charlie slept in his cradle nearby. We have 2 children. We do. Are you happy? Happier than I knew was possible. Life with 2 young children was chaotic but full. The house rang with cries and laughter, and Penelope could barely remember what silence felt like. But she would not have changed it for anything. This was what she had dreamed of when she answered that false advertisement, a family and home of her own. She had found it, just not in the way she had expected. The years passed in a blur of milestones and seasons. Charlie took his first steps, then Grace. They learned to talk, their voices high and sweet. The ranch prospered under Owen's careful management and Penelope's practical support. They expanded the herd, improved the house, built a barn for the horses. It was a good life built on hard work and love. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Owen gave Penelope a gift, a silver locket with his picture on one side and the children's on the other. She fastened it around her neck and vowed never to take it off. "I want you to remember," Owen said, holding her close. "Remember where we started and how far we have come." "I could never forget. You saved my life, Owen, not just that morning, but every day since. You saved mine too. I was just existing before you, going through the motions. You gave me a reason to live, not just survive." They kissed, long and deep, and Penelope marveled at how the passion between them had not dimmed despite the years and the demands of children and work. If anything, it had deepened, grown richer with shared experience and proven devotion. That night, after the children were asleep, they made love with the tenderness and familiarity of long practice. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Owen's arm around her, Penelope thought about the journey that had brought her here. The fear and desperation of that first night, the miracle of Owen finding her, the whirlwind courtship and marriage, the children and the life they had built together. "You kept your promise," she said into the quiet. "I have not seen a single dawn alone since that morning, and you never will." Not so long as I draw breath. I know, and that is the greatest gift you could ever give me, not just your presence but your constancy, your love. You have all of me, Penelope, always. She believed him absolutely. In a world that had proven unpredictable and often cruel, Owen was her constant, her certainty. And she was his. They had found each other in the harshest of circumstances and built something beautiful from it. That was worth celebrating, worth protecting, worth everything. Years continued to flow like water, each season bringing its own challenges and joys. Charlie grew into a serious boy who followed his father everywhere, learning ranching from the ground up. Grace was more like Penelope, practical and quick-witted, helping in the house and garden with cheerful efficiency. When Charlie was 7 and Grace was 5, Penelope gave birth to a third child, another boy they named Daniel. This pregnancy and birth were the easiest yet, and Penelope joked that she was finally getting the hang of it. Daniel was a happy baby who grew into an easygoing child, content to observe the world around him with calm interest. He balanced out Charlie's intensity and Grace's energy, and the 3 children formed a tight unit that gave both Penelope and Owen immense satisfaction. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Owen took on a hired hand, a young man named Tom who reminded him of himself at that age, full of determination and willing to work hard. With help, Owen could take on more cattle, and the income allowed them luxuries they had not imagined in the early years. A new stove for Penelope, better furniture, even a piano that Grace took to with surprising aptitude. Martha remained a fixture in their lives until she passed peacefully in her sleep when Charlie was 10. Her death hit them all hard, but they took comfort in knowing she had been happy, surrounded by people who loved her. Owen and Penelope bought the boarding house from Martha's estate, unable to bear the thought of strangers running it. They hired a couple to manage it day to day, but Penelope visited often, maintaining the standards Martha had set. As the children grew older, Penelope found more time for herself. She started a lending library in town, collecting books and encouraging reading among the scattered population. She taught Sunday school at the church and organized social events that brought the community together. Owen supported all of it, proud of his wife's energy and compassion. They celebrated their 10th anniversary with a party at the ranch, inviting everyone they knew. The house and yard were full of people, food and laughter. Charlie, now 11, complained about having to wear good clothes, while Grace, 9, enjoyed the attention and Daniel, 3, toddled around being spoiled by every adult present. Owen stood beside Penelope on the porch, watching it all, his arm around her waist. "Did you ever imagine this?" he asked. 10 years ago, did you think this was possible? Not like this. I hoped for a family, a home, but what we have exceeds my wildest dreams. Mine too. You gave me everything, Penelope. She turned to look at him, this man who had aged into his 30s with Grace, still strong and handsome, his face lined now but in ways that spoke of laughter and sun. We gave each other everything. That is what marriage is supposed to be. Not all marriages are like ours. No, but ours is exactly what it should be. They kissed, not caring who might see, and the guests cheered. It was a perfect moment in a perfect day, one of many they had been blessed to share. The years brought changes, as they always do. Charlie grew into a young man, tall and capable, taking on more responsibility on the ranch. Grace blossomed into a lovely young woman with suitors showing up at the door, though none met Owen's exacting standards, much to Penelope's amusement. Daniel proved to have a gift with horses, gentling even the wildest with patience and intuition. Owen and Penelope aged together, their hair going gray, their bodies showing the wear of hard work and life. But their love remained strong, perhaps stronger than ever. They had weathered storms, literal and metaphorical, losing cattle to drought one year, nursing each other through illnesses, dealing with the challenges their children faced as they grew. Through it all, they remained united, facing everything together. On their 20th anniversary, Owen took Penelope back to the spot where he had proposed, a high point on the ranch that overlooked miles of land. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "I was terrified that day," Owen admitted. "Asking you to marry me after such a short time, I thought you might say no, might think I was crazy." "I thought you might be crazy," Penelope teased, "but I also thought you were wonderful, and I knew somehow that saying yes was the right choice. Best decision I ever made asking you." "Best decision you ever made saying yes." No arguments there. They stood together watching the sun sink below the horizon, comfortable in the silence. After all these years, they did not need to fill every moment with words. Their presence was enough, their hands clasped together, their shoulders touching. When the stars began to appear, Penelope said, "Do you remember what you told me? That first morning." "I said a lot of things that morning. You said I would never see dawn alone again, that you promised." "And I've kept that promise." "You have. 20 years of waking up beside you, 20 years of shared dawns and shared lives. I am the luckiest woman alive." Owen pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "I am the lucky one. I almost rode past that morning, almost took the long way around. If I had, I would have missed you and my whole life would have been different. Empty. But you did not. Fate or God or just plain luck brought you to me at exactly the right moment. I prefer to think it was fate, that we were always meant to find each other one way or another." "Then I will choose to believe that too." They rode back to the ranch in the darkness, guided by starlight and long familiarity with the land. The house was lit up, their children and hired hands creating noise and activity inside. It was home in every sense of the word, filled with love and life and everything that mattered. That night, lying in bed, Owen pulled Penelope close and whispered, "Here is to 20 more years, and then 20 more after that. That is a lot of dawns. And I plan to be here for every single one of them." Penelope smiled in the darkness, secure in his arms, and let herself drift toward sleep. Outside, the wind whispered across the plains, carrying the scent of sagebrush and possibility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys, as every day did. But whatever came, they would face it together, as they had faced everything since that frozen morning so long ago. The children married eventually, one by one, giving Owen and Penelope grandchildren who filled the house with new energy and laughter. Charlie married a rancher's daughter and settled on land adjacent to Owen's, expanding the family operation. Grace married a doctor and moved to Santa Fe, though she visited often with her growing brood. Daniel stayed on the ranch, taking over more of the day-to-day operations as Owen slowed down. Owen and Penelope became respected elders in the community, known for their generosity and wisdom. They helped young couples starting out, remembering their own difficult beginning. They donated to the church and school, improved roads, and supported any effort to better life in their corner of the territory. New Mexico achieved statehood in 1912, and Owen and Penelope celebrated along with everyone else, proud to be part of something larger. The world was changing rapidly, automobiles replacing horses, electricity reaching even remote areas. But the core of their life remained the same: the land, the family, the love they shared. In their 60s, Owen and Penelope finally slowed down, letting their children run the ranch while they enjoyed a more leisurely pace. They took long walks together, read books on the porch, and spent hours playing with their grandchildren. The house was never quiet, never empty, always full of family. On their 40th anniversary, their children threw them a celebration that drew people from across the state. Friends and neighbors, business associates and family members gathered to honor the couple who had built so much from so little. Speeches were made praising their contributions to the community, but the best moment came when Owen stood to speak. He was 70 now, his hair white, his face deeply lined, but his voice was still strong as he looked at Penelope sitting beside him. People have asked me over the years what the secret is to a long marriage. I have told them different things at different times, but the truth is simple. You marry the right person. You marry someone you respect, someone who makes you better, someone you would do anything for. And then you keep choosing them every single day through everything life throws at you. I have been choosing Penelope for 40 years, and it is the easiest decision I make every morning. There was not a dry eye in the room. Penelope stood and kissed him, not caring about the audience, and the guests erupted in applause. Later, alone in their room, Penelope said, "That was beautiful. What you said, it was true, every word. I have been choosing you too every single day, and I would choose you again in a heartbeat, even knowing how hard some of those days were. The hard days made us stronger, they did, but I am grateful for the easy days too, for this, right now. Getting to grow old with you." Owen took her hand, bringing it to his lips. "Growing old with you is an honor." They sat together in the lamplight, hands clasped, thinking about all they had been through together. The fear and desperation of the beginning, the joy of falling in love, the building of a family and a legacy. It had been a good life, a full life, and they were not done yet. More years passed, measured in seasons and grandchildren and the steady rhythms of ranch life. Owen began to slow more noticeably in his 70s, his joints stiff, his energy not what it had been. Penelope too felt the weight of years, though she remained sharp and engaged. They spent more time sitting than working, but they remained active in family life, offering advice and support to the younger generations. When Owen was 78, he suffered a heart episode that laid him low for weeks. Penelope nursed him back to health with fierce determination, refusing to even consider the alternative. He recovered, though diminished, and they both knew their time was growing shorter. They made their peace with it, had already lived longer than many of their generation. On a clear autumn morning, when Owen was 81 and Penelope 80, they sat together on the porch watching the sunrise. It had become their ritual in recent years, this quiet time together before the household stirred. The sky lightened gradually from black to gray to pink to gold, and they watched in comfortable silence. "Still beautiful," Owen said softly. "After all these years, still beautiful. It is, though I think I have seen enough dawns to last several lifetimes. But not alone, never alone." "Never alone," Penelope agreed. She squeezed his hand. "You kept your promise, Owen Watts. 56 years ago you told me I would never see dawn alone again, and you have been here for every single one. Easiest promise I ever made to keep." They sat as the sun rose fully, warming their old bones, content in the knowledge that whatever came next, they had lived well and loved well. Their children and grandchildren would carry on, would tend the land and remember the stories. The legacy of that frozen morning and the cowboy who had promised forever would endure. That evening, surrounded by family, Owen Watts passed quietly in his sleep, Penelope holding his hand. She mourned deeply but without bitterness. They had been blessed with decades together, more than many couples got. She had his love, his children, his legacy. And she had the memory of that dawn, the first of so many they had shared, when he had looked at her with such certainty and made a promise that changed her life. Penelope lived another 3 years, remaining on the ranch, surrounded by family. She told stories to her great-grandchildren about the old days, about coming west as a mail-order bride, about nearly freezing to death, and being saved by a cowboy who became her whole world. She spoke of Owen with love and longing, but also with gratitude for all they had shared. When her time came, she went peacefully, in the same bed where she and Owen had slept for over 50 years. Her last morning, she woke before dawn despite her weakness and asked to be helped to the window. Her children gathered around as the sky lightened, holding her hands, whispering comfort as the first rays of sun broke the horizon. Penelope smiled. "He is here," she whispered. "Owen is here, and we are watching the dawn together just like always." Her children looked at each other with tears in their eyes but said nothing. Let her have this comfort, this vision or dream or reality of reuniting with the man she had loved so completely. Penelope's eyes fluttered closed, her breathing slowed, and as the sun rose fully, bathing the room in golden light, she took her last breath with that smile still on her lips. They buried her beside Owen on the ranch they had built together, under the wide New Mexico sky they had both loved. The headstones were simple, bearing their names and dates and a single shared inscription that Charlie had chosen. Together for every dawn forever. The ranch remained in the family, passed down through generations who never forgot the story of how it all began. The tale of Penelope and Owen became a legend in the area, told and retold until it took on an almost mythical quality. The mail-order bride who almost died, the cowboy who saved her, the promise that was kept through decades and trials, the love that endured. And every morning when the sun rose over that corner of New Mexico, it seemed to shine a little brighter on that ranch, as though blessing the memory of two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from a moment of desperate need. Their love had started in the coldest, darkest hour before dawn, and it had lasted through every dawn after, proving that sometimes the best things in life come when we least expect them, in the forms we do not anticipate, and from the people who simply show up at exactly the right moment and promise to stay. The legacy of that promise, of Owen and Penelope's love, lived on in their descendants who worked the land and told the stories. It lived on in the community they had helped build, in the church they had supported, in the library Penelope had started. It lived on in the very soil of the ranch, enriched by decades of care and love and dedication. And perhaps, on clear mornings when the air was cold and the sky turned from black to pink to gold, if you listened carefully, you could hear the echo of a promise made long ago. You will never see dawn alone again. A promise kept with absolute faithfulness, proving that true love, when found, endures not just through life but beyond it, into whatever comes next, eternal as the sunrise itself.